Okay, we are live. Hello, everybody out there. Thank you for tuning in this evening, and welcome back to the Erasmus Expeditions. This is going to be another entry into the Help Action video series, one of the Life by the Square Inch features here on the channel. This is going to be, like I said, episode 3, and we are going to be discussing Invoking Emotions. Tonight, I am very, very glad to welcome my guest. Her name is Megan Hambrock. She is with the YouTube channel Dice on Ice. And yeah, I'm really excited to have Megan on and talk about how to bring emotion into your games. So, Megan, son of a bitch, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you? Thanks for having me on here.
Absolutely. Like I said, it's my pleasure. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and feel free to plug whatever you'd like to plug before we get started.
All right. Well, like Jeremy said, my name is Megan, and I am one half of the YouTube channel Dice on Ice. Also, one half of the publishers of the Ravaged Wasteland of Cryfoth, a post-apocalyptic setting supplement for 5e. And it is available now on DriveThruRPG. And that's all the things I could put my name on. So that's all there is right now.
For now.
For now, yeah.
I have it on. A little birdie just told me, I think, that you have something else in the works. Not that long ago.
Yes. Something else that hopefully comes out and hopefully pans out. So we'll see.
There you go. I'm excited. It looks very interesting and unique. So I'm really excited to see how that's going to play out.
Awesome.
Cool. So before we get started, if you're new to this channel, welcome. Thank you for tuning in. This is an adult channel. We tend to run adult games. This will be an adult interview, not that kind of interview. But there will be bad language. I can't help myself. I apologize right now. And if that's the kind of thing that is troubling for you, then scoot. If not, then welcome to the shit show. Okay, so let's see. I think let's take one of the questions that I have for you, Megan. We'll do that first.
Sure.
So one of the things that I like to ask people in the hobby is, where did you begin? So where and how did you find this bizarre and wonderful diversion?
Well, I'm fairly new to D&D, actually. I've only been playing for about 2 years. I first started when my fiance got together a group. He's like, hey, we're going to play this thing called Dungeons and Dragons, and we're going to try it out. I have a group. Let's do it. And it took a rather long time for me to understand that it is in fact not a video game and that you use your imagination, which I was very unsure of. And in fact, when we first started playing, I absolutely hated it. I did not. It was very much just a kind of a shit show. I didn't really like it. I'm like, well, there's no story. They were playing very mechanically, and very just by the rules. It was like a board game, and I wasn't too keen on that. So, but then a couple weeks later, Connor showed me a little video called The Provokers, and I saw that, and I'm like, that is what I want to do. That is how I want to play it. I want to be thematic. I want it to be just you're placed in a world. And I joined the Absolute Tabletop on Facebook. And then I just got into games and just started meeting people who had that same mentality that I did, and just the rest is history. And I haven't quit since.
Yeah, I would say that's probably an understatement. You're in a lot of games now, and you do a fantastic job in all of the ones that I've ever seen you play in or run. So about how long has that been since you started?
Um, I didn't honestly. I didn't start playing seriously until last year June, and it was about then that I really started to just dive right in.
So pretty much right before the first AtCon.
Yeah, basically.
Wow,
Yeah,
that's awesome.
yeah.
Really cool. Yeah. I definitely understand where you're coming from. I played for quite a while in the beginning, and I had a lot of fun. I enjoyed it. I liked the tactical nature, and I still play tactically in a couple of the groups that I'm in. But I really fell in love with the game in college. Whenever I played with a bunch of theater people,
Oh,
and that really
yeah.
kind of showed me, yeah, like what the game was capable of. And then I finally got it, and I was like, oh, now I see. So sometimes it can take a little while, and it usually takes, like you said, the right group, the right table or chemistry to kind of show you the way of playing the game that hits the right notes with you.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that, there's any, like, wrong way to play or
Mm.
anything like that, or that was a bad it just wasn't for me, that type of, just the board game, and I fell in love with the thematic aspect, so, yeah.
Absolutely, and it lends itself really well for online playing.
Mhm.
Online play tends to draw a lot more people who are interested in that kind of playing. And I think the Provokers was a gateway drug for a lot of people. Um, so thanks, Matt. Golly. Oh,
Peer pressure.
everybody's doing it. The first one's for free, though. All right. So what we're talking about tonight is, in particular, is invoking emotion, something that you're known for in the community. Um, Scaring the shit out of people, particularly. Um, and fear is an actual, it's an emotion. And forcing is probably the wrong word. Um, Getting someone to feel that uh, purely through imagination is not an easy feat. So, what are the ways that you as a GM can invoke an emotional response from your players? How can you ensure that all of your players are on the same emotional wavelength in a scene?
So I think right away, there has to be some sort of little peek behind the curtain of what you as a GM are trying to do, the kind of emotion that you are trying to get across. If someone with the mindset of going into a game that is going to be happy or particularly intense or not intense, and they go into a game and it's horror and it's scary, it's going to be so much harder for you as the GM to kind of pull them from whatever emotion they were expecting into the emotion that you want them to feel. So I think right away you have to set up the fact that, okay, you need to be ready to be scared. You need to be like kind of susceptible into that emotion, that feeling going into it. And the other thing too is that the players themselves have to be open to being scared. It's kind of like hypnotism where if you go in and you're like, I'm not going to be hypnotized, there's no way, no, you're not going to, it's not going to work, you're not going to be that. But if you go in with an open mind, if you go in kind of expecting something to happen, your brain does an amazing thing of taking things and just turning them on their head, seemingly innocuous things, and just for example, your players hear a knock. In a normal game, they go and answer it. In a horror game where they're going in and they're open to that, it suddenly takes on this different idea, this different meaning to it. So I think a lot of it really depends on the player. Um for that first step into it, if that
Yeah, Absolutely. You have to kind of seed the expectations.
Mhm.
You know, it's a lot like a movie with your willing suspension of disbelief. You have to be willing to give up your normal interpretation of things for the interim and say, with, you know, have buy-in, come to the table with a certain amount of buy-in, the same that you would being invested in a setting. You should come invested in the tone or emotion that that you might expect from the game. And I think you're right. I think as a DM that it's a really smart tactic, instead of keeping everything real close to the chest, saying, hey, this is supposed to be scary. Like,
Mhm.
not giving permission necessarily, but almost asking your players to meet you halfway.
Yeah, exactly. I think that especially online, it is very difficult to do because you're sitting at a computer, it's daylight, there's not a lot of and a lot of fear I find comes from other sensations. So, music or the lighting or a lot of it comes with that. You see a lot of the movies, but you can't utilize a lot of that when you're playing or running a D&D game. So you have to yeah, basically meet halfway. I'm saying I'm going to do the best that I can, but you have to be willing to receive that kind of thing.
Yeah, I agree. That's a very smart idea. And I've gotten, as I've DM'd longer and longer, I've actually gotten more okay with giving away more up front to my players. Like, you know, approaching a certain thing at the table and saying, "Hey guys, this is going to be a skill challenge. You know, we're entering into a different kind of scene, and this is the way that we're going to handle it." You know, speaking in game terms for just a moment before kind of stepping back into the scene, or telling people, hey, you know, I'm having you guys simply narrate the way that this chase is going. We're not going to be rolling dice or anything like that, but here's what I want you guys to kind of give me, you know, and being upfront about it, as opposed to trying to be super secretive and guarded about how much you mete out to your table.
I definitely think it's a collaborative adventure all the way, you know. Um it's collaborative storytelling. Like you put the situation in front of them, but they have to receive it and then react to it. The other thing that I do, which is further kind of giving away the control, is I ask them tons of questions about their backstory. If I'm trying to um, evoke fear, I will ask them, what is your character's biggest fear? What do they love? What do they desire? What mistakes have they made? And with that information, I take it and I seed it into my games and twist it so that what's interesting is that when I found with when players are forced to think about their character, they become more invested in it and becomes more part of themselves and they become more attached to the character. So whatever happens to that character is going to have a stronger effect on them rather than me just saying something scary or, you know, something creepy. But if I make it about them, if I tailor it towards them, whether they want to or not, they've developed that bond with the character and they kind of empathize with them a lot more, and that will translate into fear for the player, which then translates into fear for the character. So it's just like this feedback loop that starts.
I am a huge convert to character questionnaires, things like Dread, games that are like that, that ask a lot of upfront questions about a character, particularly pointed questions, questions that inform something either directly or indirectly for the game master. Um, I absolutely love doing that for my campaigns, especially now. So you had mentioned, actually, there is a question in the chat. I'm gonna hop over there so that way I don't lose it before it scrolls up.
Yeah.
This one is from Karen Davies, your future
Huh?
mother-in-law.
Oh no, I have to give a good answer now.
All right. No. What do you do if your players aren't getting the feel of a game or lose it part way, is there something that you can do to get it back?
So I did run into this where I wanted to play a very scary game, and the players just weren't really jiving with it. I made the decision to change my tone to fit what the players seemed to be expecting from it. I think especially I think that there are a lot of really so for example, if you're trying to really scare your characters and you're running a lot of high tension RP, you're trying to do that and you're not really evoking that, let off. Do something that isn't scary. Just kind of slow it down a little bit. Do something more normal so that, and then
Uh-oh. You froze up for me. I don't know if I froze up for everyone else or if Megan did. Anybody out there? If you are in the chat, if you can hear me, let me know that Megan's the one that froze, or if it is me that froze. Let me know. Uh-oh.
hello?
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Oh no.
Okay. I don't know which one of us froze up there, but
Cursed internet.
sorry. Now the dogs are, of course, going bananas. Okay. Sorry. Let's go. So I don't remember where we were whenever we dropped.
I was just rambling.
No. It's not rambling at all. You're giving people gold. You're Rumpelstiltskin. You're spinning gold right now. And they need it. So let's see. The question was about how to get it back, and you said jiving with the beat of the table. Uh-oh.
Okay, well.
Twice the Megan.
Yep.
Excellent.
Do
you guys answer in stereo, or do you want to round robin it?
Really creepy if the other channel started talking.
Yeah, out of sync, especially. So see, this is how Megan does it, y'all.
Yeah.
No. So yes, I absolutely agree with you. I think that it falls under the same category as understanding the psychology and the rhythm of your table, and like you said, matching step. Like, you can either run the game that you want to run and take the chance of having X number of disappointed players if that's not the way that the game seems to be going, or you take the loss, run a maybe less than satisfying game of what you were expecting, and then there's only one person who walks away from the table with not really having gotten what they wanted.
Yeah, I think you really have to read the table. If they, if they're just losing interest, then maybe switch tactics, try something different before you try again. But if they're really just not seeming interested, or their characters don't really match up with what you're trying to do, then yeah, I agree. Just kind of switch, and then I mean, you can still have a completely fun game with that if you're just willing to just kind of change it so that you're jiving better with the players. I think that would create a more fun game than just trying to like force your way, just kind of bull rush your way through a game.
Yeah, it's a lot like what I imagine sailing to be. Like, you have to tack with the wind, or else you're going to be fighting the whole time. If you really want the best momentum, the best sailing forward, the best progress, then figure out where the wind is blowing, adjust, and it's going to go a lot better.
And I think with that, though, a lot can be mitigated by, again, telling your players what you expect and what they expect from it. You know, have as much of a conversation as you need to about it.
I beat this drum a lot, but session zeros. I'm a big fan of session zeros. Now, for a one shot, it's a little bit harder to do, but with social media, there's really not an excuse to not have that kind of conversation before the game goes up. Cool. Okay. So let's go to one of the questions. You had mentioned music. Now, I constantly use music in my games, but it's for myself. Like, nobody else can hear it. I do usually share the playlist, but it's not synced up, so it's all over the place. But for me, it seems to go a really long way towards laying kind of an emotional foundation for me. Music does. And I know that you use a lot of music and sound effects and things in your games. How do you cultivate a piece if you're going to use it? Like, how do you find it? How do you select it? How do you know that it's right? And what tips do you have for anyone that would like to do the same for their games?
Well, I think that in general, if you're doing sound effects, so I think that sound effects and music are very different, and you would go around them in kind of different ways, especially with online where it might not be as easy to share, say, music with everyone and have it as a joint experience, but you could share sound effects. I would say less is more. If you know, and have things that are really kind of jarring, a door knock, like a doorbell, or creaking or whispering, something that is very evocative, and have it kind of timed in the right moment so that you're not overdoing it, but it's still at moments where maybe people don't expect it. That's what I like doing the sound effects when, or say having a knock at a door or a huge crash when there's nothing happening, when the characters are either having a conversation, everything seems normal, and then you punch it, there's the sound effect, and that can really add a lot of, you know, dramatic emotion to what you're doing. Um,
So you
yeah,
typically use them more as like a primer for emotional reaction.
absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Very cool.
Yeah. Definitely to, and then I leave it very open-ended for what the players will do, how they react to that sound. I find especially with horror games and trying to evoke that fear, you can't really do a lot of planning because you have to be very reactive to how your players react. You know.
I think that's actually solid advice for setting hooks running a game, period. Whether it be an emotional hook or a plot hook or whatever. Like, if you're paying attention to what your table and what your players are responding the best to, that's going to be the thing that they are most easily going to go after, to bite at, whenever you bait them with it.
Mhm. You know,
Really
for
important.
example, right? Like if they hear the knock at the door and they don't really respond to it that well, you change it. You do something else that they are either talking about or are responding to. And I usually have kind of a set amount of sound effects that I kind of have at my disposal. I'm not necessarily going to use them all, but I have them out and I have them kind of labeled so that if I feel like, okay, here's where a creak would be really, really effective. So it's all about, with sound effects, it's all about being in the moment and present during the game, and looking at what the players are doing, and then kind of using those sound effects, like you said, that I think that's the perfect word, as a primer for a response.
Interesting that it's basically utilized as an element in the same way that you would use many other things, whether it's a random encounter chart or a list of names that you could call from that have the right cultural notations or whatever. It's about being prepared to improvise in the moment.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And of course, I mean, if you're playing a game in medieval, you're not going to have a doorbell. I mean, that would be really freaky, but maybe not in the way that you want it. So,
Yeah, I don't know. Shakespeare put a clock in Julius Caesar. So, no, just kidding. He got away with a lot of shit.
yeah, well,
For goodness sakes.
that's understandable.
I guess we can give him a pass. I guess.
In terms of music, to be honest, I don't have as much experience with that as I would like to. I think that music can be such a strong set of emotional triggers, and I think that is perfect. But I think with me, I would like to have it where everyone is hearing it, and I like that idea of control. Like I like I'm a control freak, so even though I'm improvising, I like to so I want to fiddle around with that, but I do believe that music uh, you know can really help with setting the tone. Even if so I'll play a lot of songs before my games that are kind of setting that tone. And I think that YouTube actually has a wonderful library of songs that are royalty free, and you can kind of go on and you can select the theme and the mood that you want to, whether you want it to be cinematic or dark or punk or ambient. And they have some incredible music on there that I use for kind of my game music that I really like.
Awesome. Yeah, I haven't really played around much with the stuff that's royalty free on YouTube, just because I don't know. To tell you the truth, I just haven't ever really looked at it. I don't really know how to activate it like during a game, so I just kind of throw my Spotify playlist up there as a link. I'm like, if you want it, there it is. Have fun, and if not, then no big deal.
Mhm.
But yes, I agree. Music is a very evocative shorthand. It's a really easy way to establish things like tone and emotion. Very easy, very quickly.
I think that too, if you're trying to choose music, then pick out the movies that are closest to the game that you are trying to run. Most movies will have a playlist. Most movies have, and you let the experts do it. They know how to make really great music that will be super evocative. So, when you find that, then just use that kind of music. I think that I love the cinematic music for movies is just amazing.
Absolutely. Yeah, I am a big soundtrack person, and I actually plan on doing an entire other episode about music at some point in the future. So yeah. All right. So there is another question in the chat. I'll go ahead and hop up to that before we lose it. This is from Cameron Desert King. Do you find it easier to invoke emotion in a person at the table or online via Hangouts, etc.? What difficulties or benefits do you think apply to one and not the other?
I've always found that in my experience, table games are a lot more lax than online games. I find that when you have table games, it's usually a bunch of friends, you're trying to catch up, and you got a lot of jokes and it plays into your game, and that's just the environment of the table, which is fantastic. And I find that with online, it's usually a lot more pointed, a lot like people know kind of what they're getting into, and they kind of not to say that they're not friends and they don't talk, but like they They know kind of what they're getting into, and they kind of have it's just a different mindset. Um, with I'm just gonna go with the fear thing. With online, it is very difficult to control the ambience of where your player is sitting. Right, I can't just reach through the screen and control your lighting, and have pictures and stuff like that. Um, so you have to use the senses that you can manipulate when you're online. Same within the table. Use the senses that you can manipulate. For example, the lighting, have candles, have, it really dark. You can have music there. Online, you have to rely on mostly your tone of voice. Your voice is the strongest weapon, I guess, in evoking emotion. And then you have, your sound effects that you can use, but it is much more limited online than at the table, at least in my experience.
Yeah, I would agree to that. And I think role playing in general, from my experience, tends to be stronger online because asking someone to act essentially, which is what you're doing when you're role playing in person, tends to put a lot of people on edge a lot more. Something about doing it online, you're in a room, at least for me, I'm in a room by myself. So I don't have to worry about, being embarrassed and, all of that kind of stuff. Even though there's a camera in front of me and it's recording the entire thing and there are people reacting, there's a little bit of a separation there. So I think it's a little easier for people to step outside of their comfort zone online than in person.
Yeah. I totally agree, and I think it has to do with wearing pants.
True. Pants kill immersion for me.
Yeah.
All right. So role playing games give people a place to explore a complex range of scenarios, such as pants, and emotions that have real world analogs, and some of which are, more direct than others. But they can be great catharsis, like a way to experience some of these things in a kind of trial run, without ever being in any real danger. How important is it for you to be proactive in facilitating these kinds of scenes in your games? Or should you just let them happen organically?
I find that a lot of things happen very organically based on how the players emotions are, and kind of the journey that they've been on of the game kind of dictates where they want to go emotionally. I would almost say that it has where the emotion goes kind of is not up to the GM as much. I mean, you set up the situation, you set up everything. These I really do like using, real world kind of scenarios to that would invoke an emotion. Having you know, a really friendly NPC that you develop a bond with can evoke emotions of happiness, right? You use that, and then killing them would evoke, um, sadness, anger, So I definitely think that you, as a GM, should have an idea and use real world situations that would normally evoke emotions, because I find that it's very parallel with how your players are going to react as their character.
Well, that segues really well into one of the questions that Jeff Doty asked, which is there a limit to how far you'll push a certain emotion, particularly the more challenging ones? Is it okay to try to make your players feel frantic or distraught or even crazy? Is there a point where it no longer becomes a mood tool to enhance, but it becomes overwhelming or even potentially damaging or day ruining?
I think so. Definitely. I mean, I've played in some games that have just, fucked me up for the next like 2 or 3 days. It's just but I think it's important to have a conversation with your players um with how far they're willing to go, and if there are some, and this can include emotions. This just doesn't have to be um scenes or certain things. If you talk to your players and they're like, "Hey, I really don't want to feel, I don't think I'm in the right headspace to feel that frantic fear, anger, or sadness," that you know, I find, at least with me, like, in some scenes, I genuinely feel that emotion that my player is feeling. I can feel it, and sometimes that's just not what the players want, and so I think that is a really important thing to discuss with them, so that you're not going too far, so that you don't kind of trigger that response from them that they might, because it's all about having fun. It's all at the end of the day, they need to come away with it not feeling horrible, not feeling like they just wasted their time or they weren't having fun. Excuse me. And if to them having those strong emotions isn't entertaining to them, then that's fine. That's what you have to take into consideration when you're running a game. Um, I definitely think that everyone has a different limit with what they want to play, in terms of how emotionally kind of roller coastery they want to go. You know,
Yeah, I think that makes very good sense. Like a lot of things, um, the session zero is a really good place to establish a lot of that, I think. But it can change on a day-to-day basis, on a session-to-session basis. And I think that
yeah,
it's important that if you are feeling that kind of vulnerability that you don't want to explore, I think it's a really important thing to be outward with that,
yeah,
to go to your
absolutely.
GM and say, "Hey, I don't know where things have been going or where things are going tonight, but things have kind of been leading in this particular direction, or I think that maybe this is coming up. I'd really rather avoid that if I can."
I I absolutely agree. I think that there is no shame in that, and if you have a good GM or a decent GM, that they will accommodate for that. You know, to say there is, I don't believe that there is an absolute limit to how much you can emotionally manipulate, the scene or the players, or how, you want them to react. I don't think there's a limit to what you can do, in the general term. I think it's up to the GM and the players to set that limit, to set those parameters, and it's the lowest common denominator. Like, if one person is not okay, then it's not okay. Some groups will want to have that racking sadness, that fear, that those strong emotions. To them that is fun, to them that is cathartic, to them that, they might be able to deal with some emotions in real life through that. Some people don't want to do that, and that's fine. Some people just want to have fun. Some people don't want to feel those emotions, and I think you need to take that into account.
Very well said. I agree. And it's one of those where, again, like, you need to have some familiarity with the situation of the table, um, and if it's an issue, uh, skirt it. Don't hammer it home. Um, you have to be willing to accommodate, um, and emotionally, I think is probably more important than any other kind of accommodation that you can make at the table.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, in the past, there has been an unfair stigma attached to mental health issues, when the reality is that most people suffer from them in one facet or another. I have heard you mention before that there are some personal struggles in your life. Do you feel that the experiences with these struggles have given you a greater understanding of emotion and how you might be able to wield that to your advantage in gaming?
Oh, absolutely. Um, I think that, as it's an interesting dichotomy, where you feel these emotions that are, if you have depression or anxiety, you have these internal emotions, and they range. They go up, they go down, they go sideways, diagonally. Um, but you can take that feeling and you can kind of encapsulate it and then let it out in a safe way, um, in your games. I know in when I especially experience this as a player, in that I will take an attribute of myself that, say, I don't like or I want to deal with, honestly, or even some of my own flaws, and I put them into that character, and through that character I can talk it through. I can go through these situations in kind of like this safe place, um, and almost deal with them in real time, kind of thing. I mean, of course, I'm never going to be confronted, by some of these fantastical things, but the emotions are real. There is no fantasy emotions that you don't experience in real life. Fear, anger, sadness, you experience them as a person, your character experiences them, and so you can go to that and you can use your emotions, use your um feelings to make your character seem more real, to seem more genuine. Um, and so I use that a lot. Insecurities are a huge thing. I take some of my real world insecurities and I put them onto my characters, and immediately they just come to life. Immediately they seem more real. And when they're more real, I can look at that and like I said, almost deal with it, in this kind of safe space, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Everybody, I think, inserts a little bit of themselves into each character that they play. It's kind of hard not to. But I think also there's enough difference with most of our characters that it allows a certain level of objectivity to that person. So it sounds horrible, but effectively you can judge your character's flaws, even if they are your own flaws. You can apply a certain level of distance that you can't with your own shortcomings, and you can see them, like you said, almost projected onto this other entity and judge them in a way that I think gives you the kinds of tools that you might need to heal those issues within yourself. I I think there's a really good reason why psychologists and psychiatrists have used role playing, not role playing games necessarily, but role playing, the kernel of what a role playing game is, um, as therapy.
I think too is that, like you said, the person is different. They're not you. They don't have the same baggage, the same emotions as you do. And the thing with that is that you can choose one attribute. You can almost dissect it and deal with things one at a time. Deal with, your insecurities, your emotions, one character at a time, kind of thing, where you can, yeah, like you said, just objectively look at it and dissect it, and just be able to take that one little, entity, and mold it and mesh it, and find ways, and then apply that to your real life. And you just do it subconsciously. I found it, at least.
Absolutely. And I think that has something to do with kind of what you said earlier with how the situations that you might find yourself in as a character um, are not normal. They're supernatural or extraordinary, and but there's usually a thread of realism in there somewhere. There's an analogy that can be drawn to something else in your life or somebody that you know's life, and I think that's one of the things that makes role playing games so fantastic. Is like I said earlier, and like you reiterated just a moment ago, it gives you the place to practice how to deal with these things without the danger of having to do it in the real world. Like you can experience loss in a role playing game, and if the buy-in is big enough and the return investment is deep enough, you suffer real loss. You suffer real grief, real frustration, real anger when a character of yours or a close NPC or another member of the party dies. And that's a really healthy thing to experience in a game because it gives you the kinds of training wheels, if you will, on how to deal with something like loss in real life. It's a trial run, a practice.
It's interesting because they say that when you dream, your brain is running simulations in a safe space. Is running through scenarios that you'll never find yourself in, but your brain is kind of like, okay, I'm getting ready, so now I know how to, fight a floating banana or, something like that. Um, but and I think the same can be said about role playing. It's that safe space, and you know what? It is okay to feel emotion. It is okay to have connections, and it is okay, you know, though it's not real. It's just how people they like to empathize. They like to put themselves into things, and I think that the best thing that can be said is that it is okay to feel that, and it is okay to work through it. So, don't be afraid when you feel sad because your imaginary character friend, like that's okay. That's good to, like you said, it's healthy to feel that.
I think there's a lot of people out there that play the game and have the misconception that they need to be this mass, that their character needs to be infallible, they need to be rock solid, they need to skate through everything, as unscathed as possible. And if that's the kind of game that you like to play, then that's fine. But if you're playing that kind of game, that kind of character, and you're finding yourself unable to pull this emotion out of the game, to experience these kinds of exchanges, it's because you're not allowing yourself to be vulnerable. You're not opening yourself up to pain, to the suffering or the joy even. And if you want to have a big emotional payout from the game, then you have to be able to buy in on an emotional level. You have to find a way to care and love the world, the NPCs, the other characters, um, and expose those vulnerabilities in your own characters so that they can be capitalized on.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree wholeheartedly. I would almost say that if you find yourself feeling unfulfilled by playing a character, then maybe that's what you're missing, is that emotional vulnerability, those insecurities, those flaws that you can just put in, and your character just feels so whole, and it's surprisingly easy to play it. And it's surprisingly, you'd be surprised with how easy it is to role play a flaw or an insecurity, and then to look at it and say, "Oh, wow, like that's how they dealt with it. That's how they felt. Like, what is this feeling I have?" And just to go from there.
Yeah. Um, so on that same point, conjuring real emotion on command is a very difficult skill to hone. Even with years of theater training, it's something that I have a very hard time doing. For me, it's kind of one of the strongest places for the fake it until you make it proverb. I fake an emotion until I finally kind of feel drawn into a scene, either because of the way that it's been set up, or the other players, or the GM, or what have you. Many people that I have talked to, actors and role players alike, will actually draw on real memories to conjure up the needed emotion, even if it's a different emotion sometimes. So, other than what you've already kind of touched on a little bit, what other tips or tricks would you have for somebody who's wanting to do this?
So to evoke emotion, I would choose something. If you just want that primal level, choose something that you know is going to hit home. Choose something that is very general, you know, uh, befriending someone, automatically you know what kind of emotion that's going to have. You choose these basic actions, these basic interactions that you know is going to have that primal emotion, and then you build on it. You slowly kind of add the layers, you add the intricacies, you add maybe a touch of different emotions you want them to feel. Some of the more yeah, so I would say just go for that primal level, that one incident that you know is going to have an impact on, joy, fear, sadness, anger, and then you slowly kind of build on top of that. Maybe they're happy, but they're also, feel guilty. You want that as well, but your base, start with the base and then work up from there. Don't uh, it's hard to kind of force this, like you said, force a certain emotion that they're going to have. But I think that the base emotions are pretty easy to do something with, and then working with them and building those intricacies, implementing their backgrounds into it, will help to add the depth to that base emotion that you want them to feel.
Absolutely. That's one of the things that I really have taken a liking to doing with, especially with campaigns, is I have my players set up connections ahead of time, NPC connections, connections with the other player characters, a secret that their character has, whether they know it or not, things like that. What that does is that gives me those emotional ties that I can pull on later on and cause a an emotional reaction, hopefully.
Mhm.
Somebody, just as an example, I'm going to pick on her. Karen, in the Beneath the Banner Shadow game, is playing an elf, and she decided that she had a half elven child that she hadn't seen in 20 years. Um, so I pulled that NPC into the game very early on, and he's hurt, he's angry, he's jaded, he's frustrated, doesn't trust her, um, and it set a an emotional path for her character and inadvertently her player to explore through the course of the game thus far. And it seems as though she's gotten a large emotional payment from the game because she gave that as a huge vulnerability up front and allowed me to mess with it.
Yeah, I think that there is nothing better than weaving in your players' ideas. Your players can help you so much in evoking those emotions that you want by just implementing what they tell you. And you don't need paragraphs and paragraphs and paragraphs. A simple sentence can do so much, can seed so much information, inspiration, and emotions.
And I think a lot of that comes with looking for opportunity to to put those things in. Instead of just making another random NPC who, is captured and being tortured, it might be contrived, but make it somebody who is from the backstory of one of your characters. I guarantee you may not be able to know the kind of reaction that they're going to have, but I guarantee you they're going to have a reaction, and it will be a large reaction.
Yeah, and I think too that based on their reaction is where then you know where to take it next. Positive or negative, you react accordingly to that.
And I think that goes for all of the table. The rest of the characters and the players even then cue off of whatever that initial knee-jerk reaction is, and it colors the entirety of the entire scene and whatever scenes that could be connected to come later.
Yeah, and there is no shortage of inspiration that comes on the fly when your players are doing something and making decisions and having that emotion. You as a DM, like, listen to how they're feeling and where I find that there is almost a group emotion. You have your individual characters that are all feeling their different things, but there is a general group atmosphere emotion, and as a DM you can take that and you can kind of lead them around with using that emotion.
Yeah, I agree. Again, kind of reading the temperature of the table. It's not just about, whether a combat is going on too long or, whether it's time for, a comedic NPC or what have you. It's also very much about emotion. So I think that about does it.
Yay. So much emotional talk here.
Yep. It's been emotional.
Yeah.
But I've been very, very happy to have you on the show, Megan. Whenever I had the idea to do this particular episode, I couldn't think of anybody better. So
Thank you for having me. I'm hopefully I gave some little nuggets that people can use, and
Absolutely. I think so. I took away several things already from being a part of this, so I appreciate it very much.
Awesome.
Well, go ahead and let the people know once again where you're from. Well, not where you're from, what digital space you're from.
I'm from the Great White North, in the land of the ice and snow. I am Megan. You can find me on Dice on Ice, the YouTube channel, where, speaking of emotions and horror, I will be starting a Curse of Strahd campaign starting in the new year, which will be very spooktacular. So hopefully, yeah. If you guys want to watch, it'll be live on Tuesdays. So, and thank you again, Jeremy, for having me on, and the questions were amazing, and the insight that you could also share was also very, very good. So thank you.
Absolutely. I'm glad to hear that. Yes, Curse of Strahd, that is very, very exciting. I've talked to more than one person that is all a tither about it. So I know that it's going to be really good. And yeah, Transylvanian horror is always a really good kind of thing to tap into. So I think
a good vein to tap into.
So yeah, I think that's really exciting news. And yeah, guys, that's it for me. I think that's it for Megan. And until next time, may your dice roll high and your snacks always be within reach.